Well, here's a better look at the buck that I shot this week. This is actually the second deer I've shot on a little 40-acre property. And this week we're going to talk to you all about what it takes to shoot mature bucks on small properties. That seems to be a common theme. Most guys aren't able to get out and buy 1,000 acres to hunt on, and most of us are hunting, less than 100 acres. So the property that we shot this deer on, we've done a lot of work, made a lot of improvements over the years, had the property 4 years now, and so we're going to go into detail and talk quite a bit about some of those improvements and what it takes to be able to shoot mature bucks on small properties. This deer, I shot him yesterday, which was the 12th, and then the first buck I shot this year was just back on the 9th, so 4 days apart. And I think I attribute a lot of that to not only the particular property that it is, but the improvements and how we hunt the property. So we're going to go into some detail on that, and I think it'll provide you guys a lot of value, a lot of perspective. So a lot of guys, when they start out wanting to buy a farm, most of us aren't able to go out and buy hundreds of acres, as I said. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you're in a position that you can buy several hundred acres and have a better chance at holding more deer, obviously go for it. I think we'd all take that opportunity. But when it comes to just maybe your first farm or limited amounts of surplus income to spend on a property, you're kind of forced to buying a smaller property. And when the sole purpose of that property is to hunt on, you really want to make sure you take your time and find a property not only in a good area, but the right property within that area to allow you to be able to kill deer consistently year in and year out. So when I think about what that means, there's a few things that cross my mind. First is the area. How do you find a good area to hunt big, mature whitetails? Well, it starts with pressure. If you're hunting an area where you're next to public land, or the neighbors don't really manage the deer, or you're in an area where the neighbors all let just anybody hunt, you're going to have a hard time getting mature bucks in that particular area because they're going to get shot out. They're going to get shot young, and usually, at least for me, my personal preference, I don't like to shoot a deer until they're at least 4. Obviously, I'd like to get them to 5 and older, but in the area I hunt, 4 is a pretty mature buck. So if you're trying to hunt deer 4 years old and older, the first thing is start with an area, talk to friends, talk to the neighbors, every piece of information you can gather to try and find out how hard is the area hunted, not only during bow season, but also shotgun seasons. And then in the summers, get out and scout, do some glassing, look at fields. If you're seeing, a lot of deer, but not any big mature bucks, they're probably not going to be there in the fall either. So that's the first thing, is key in on areas where there's not a ton of pressure. And that doesn't mean go Decatur County, Iowa. There's giant deer in Decatur County, Iowa, but finding a smaller property that's affordable is going to be really challenging, and it's got the notoriety that everybody's looking there, so the prices on land are just going through the roof. Look in Union County, Clark County, areas outside in south central Iowa, or wherever you are, whether it's in Iowa or not. Look for areas that have good genetics and decent history of mature bucks being killed, but not necessarily the one that everybody thinks of when they're looking for a property. If you have an opportunity to buy 40 acres, 20 acres, 40 acres, whatever it is. I know guys that have killed 190 plus inch deer on 5 acres. So it really comes down to finding that specific spot. And what are the keys that you should look for? You say you've narrowed it down to a county, or maybe even a town or a couple townships within a county that you want to start looking really hard for a good property. Couple keys that come to mind that you want to look for to narrow down beyond that. The number one, I would say, is access. If you don't have good access, and I mean access that allows you to hunt on multiple wind directions. If you've got a south wind and you go in from the south side of the property, you're going to blow all the deer out before you even start hunting. So look for a property in this region of Iowa anyhow. Predominant winds are northwest and southeast, southwest throughout the fall. So look for properties where you can access both from the south and the north. If you can find a good area, plenty of mature bucks, low pressure, and good access from north and south on a smaller property, you'll be able to hunt it longer without blowing the deer out, and you're already half the way there to being able to kill mature bucks on a regular basis. So that's probably the number 2 key, is once you've narrowed it down to an area, look for a spot where you have really good access. And then beyond that, I would look for a travel corridor. Don't go into an area where you've got vast crop fields. You know, in the summers, you might go out scouting, you might see 100 deer out in a crop field. That doesn't mean they're going to be huntable. It's really hard to hunt deer, especially mature bucks, in a wide open crop field. So if you look at an aerial map and you see little fingers running out into a crop field, yeah, you might be able to get a stand in there and you might be able to hunt it on a north or a south wind, but the chances of deer using that on a regular basis are pretty low. So what I like to look for is big blocks of timber. Find big sections of timber, whether any direction, and then try and hone in on where are the pinch points, where are the funnels, where are the areas that you could buy 40, 60 acres, maybe even less than that, 20 acres, and take a bite-sized chunk out of that area and catch most of the traffic, especially during the rut, that are using that funnel. If you can find that, that's the absolute sweet spot. If you find an area that doesn't get a lot of pressure, you've narrowed it down to a spot where you can get access north and south, and it's a pinch point or a funnel where it connects a lot of other timber, that's going to hold deer. It's going to have deer year round. You're going to have fresh deer moving through during the rut, just like this buck that we're sitting by tonight, or today rather. I had no idea which deer this was because he was living on a neighboring property most of his life, and he just happened to come through during the rut. And that's what I look for. That's what I key in on, and that's why this week I've been able to kill 2 mature bucks, because I have all those things on a small property. So again, let's start and just assume we're talking about a 40-acre piece like where I shot this buck here. On that 40 acres, the first thing I looked at is where can I hunt and not pressure the deer. I want to be able to get in and get out as easy as possible. And on those routes in and out, I don't want to be walking through food plots or big crop fields in the evening, but I still want to be able to hunt there as much as I can, as much spare time as I have to be able to get in a stand. So one of the keys is mapping out those accesses. Use ditches if you can, or come through the timber. If you're hunting in the morning, you know, you'd be better off to come through the timber and get into a spot versus coming through a wide open ag field. That's where the deer are going to be at night, or when the sun's down. So look at your access, and then once you've defined maybe your route, try to improve it. Make it easier to get up and down, whether that means mowing trails so that you're not leaving scent. You know, grass like this here, rubbing on your pant legs or high up on your boots, that's going to attract. Every bit of surface area that touches you is holding scent to some degree. And the more you can reduce that down by mowing it or cleaning it up, getting rid of branches, sawing out limbs, the easier you can make it to get in and out, and the least amount of resistance you have or things that are going to be brushing up against you, the better. That's only going to reduce the amount of scent you're leaving. I personally like to wear big rubber boots on my way in. That keeps your scent off of them. They repel scent, and so they don't hold scent like a material like fabric does, like your pants. So anyhow, look at trails, find your accesses. If you want to mow them or do whatever you can to clean them up, that's only going to help you. So now I want to talk about a few things that I've done to enhance each particular stand setup. Again, going back to the philosophy of if you can hunt 3 trails versus 1, you better be on the 3 trail spot versus the 1. You want to improve your odds. So what can you do to improve your odds? Food plots are obvious. Most people today are well aware of planting food plots and the benefits of having a food plot by your stand. Depending on the particular spot, you may not need it. If it's a travel corridor, it's, you know, a 50-yard wide area between 2 blocks of timber, maybe the food plot doesn't help. But if you have the opportunity to put it in, you're going to attract does. You know, rather than a doe walking across a wide open field, assuming that they're comfortable enough to do that during daylight hours, you plant a little strip of clover. It could be 15 foot wide, right along that edge, right by your stand. That's going to bring does in closer. The doe leaves the scent trail. The rut, here comes the buck right behind her, hopefully. So anytime you can enhance an area with something like food, I recommend it. I try to do it to pretty much every spot I hunt. I always hunt pinch points. I love to be in a spot when I'm hunting with archery equipment where I feel very confident out to whatever range that I feel like the deer are going to be coming through at. If there's an area that they're not pinched in tight, I try to do things to improve that, to make it so that they are pinched down. So what do I mean by that? Well, talking about the food plots, shape the food plot in a way that maybe makes it wider so you have more area, more food out there available throughout the season, and then as you get close to the stand, pinch it down. There's a fence line, an old fence line that used to be coming down a tree line, and there's a gap where I've planted the clover and then my stand. So my stand's on the south edge of the property. There's a little finger that comes up to the stand. You've got the clover that comes down through that we planted to try and entice the deer, but they still like to cut across that draw where the old barbed wire fence is. So I just went in, bought some cheap fencing from hardware store, and made a short little 50-yard run of fence. It's only 4 foot tall. The deer can jump that all day long with no effort. But if they are going to come through there, I'd rather them come around the end and give me a closer chip shot. They can go around either end of it, or as I said, jump over it, no problem. So for me, it's still 100% fair chase. The deer makes the decision on which way it goes, but it does put the odds in my favor a little bit more. So that's just one trick, or a couple of tricks rather, with shaping the food plots and adding a fence or some type of barrier that I use to try and get the deer to travel a little bit closer to my stand in an open area where they might otherwise do so. Another thing I like to do is I'll put out a rubbing post with a licking branch. We did that a lot this year, and actually one of the bucks that I shot this week, back on the 9th, when that deer come out, he walked right into the food plot, came right around the end of the fence, hit the licking branch. I threw him a couple grunts, and he walked right down the rest of the food plot right in front of the blind. So he used, 3 of the things that I did this year: the food plot, the fencing, and that licking branch, all worked together to play a part in the success of that hunt. So again, those are 3 things to keep in mind if you're looking to improve a property, you're trying to improve a particular stand site. Those are some of the things that I like to do, and I've actually used this year that helped me be successful in the killing of one of the 2 bucks that I shot. So we talked about food plots as one form of habitat improvement, but one thing we haven't mentioned is timber stand improvement and grass plantings. So any acre that I have, when you think about a 40-acre property, smaller, a little bit bigger, whatever it is, if you're defining it as a small property, you want to make every single acre work for you that you can, whether that's providing food, providing water, or providing cover. If it's not doing that, it's pretty much wasted acres. So on my farm, we haven't done an extensive job of TSI, or timber stand improvement, but that's something that's on the list to get to this winter. And hopefully when we go out there and do that, we'll try and bring you some of the content, share what we're doing and the particular strategies there. But there's a plethora of information out there online on how to do it. And you can consult with a district forester in your county, and they'll actually come out and help you mark the trees and get somebody lined up if you're not comfortable doing it on your own to do the work. But essentially, timber stand improvement, what you're doing is a couple of different things. You're identifying the trees that provide value, whether that be harvestable value like big walnuts, or mast such as acorns from oak trees. Identifying the high value trees, and then trying to get rid of any of the competing trees that are taking sunlight and water and nutrients from that bigger mature oak tree or walnut tree or whatever tree it is that you're trying to release. So you're coming in, chainsaws, removing all the trees around, and in a lot of cases the USDA, they'll want you to completely drop the tree. But if you're going in and selectively harvesting and building bedding areas, you might want to actually hinge cut the tree so that you have trees coming down and creating kind of a teepee effect where it provides some shade and also cover. You're doing several different things. You're improving the production of the trees, the high value trees. You're creating cover. You're opening up the sunlight so that more vegetation will grow up, which improves the cover and the food. Browse is one of the deer's most popular food sources. They're not out there in the food plots 24/7, but you can bet when they're deep into the timber in their bed, they're going to hop up a couple times a day and grab a bite to eat. And a lot of that is just this fresh grass or browse, new growth coming up from trees that, again, may have undergone a timber stand improvement project. So the same thing goes for grasses. If you have areas that are wide open, they're not providing cover, food, or water, then you might want to come in there and think about, how can I plant the grass to help me have better access to my stand, provide some visual barrier, provide a visual barrier from a roadway. There's a lot of benefits to having grasses on a property, and bedding security is just one of those benefits. So Habitat improvement through food plots, TSI, and grass plantings. Those are huge on my list for ways to improve the overall usability, huntability of a property. Well, we've kind of covered a lot of ground today, talked about a lot of different topics. Kind of dawned on us that, you know, a lot of people would look at all this and say, that seems like an awful lot of work to shoot a deer, but if you're passionate about land and habitat improvement and deer hunting in general like we are, it's actually a labor of love, you know. It's really rewarding. This buck here, he'll be the second biggest buck I've ever shot on that farm. I've shot 4 bucks now in 4 years, all of them big mature deer, and it was all done on 40 acres. And really fortunate and blessed to be able to have the opportunity to hunt like we do and own land. I know personally I worked until this point in my life basically to be able to afford to buy ground, and every day we meet people in that same scenario. They're out there looking hard. They've been working to that point in their life to be able to afford to buy ground, and we all come to that point at some point along the way in our lives where we're ready and finally able to be able to buy a piece of ground. And so the improvements that we make and the work that we put into it, again, it's kind of a labor of love, and really fortunate to be able to do that. When you're hunting a small property, if you try to pick an area where there's a lot of big timber around and good habitat surrounding it, especially during the rut, just like this week, at any point in time, a big buck could come cruising through. So that's about it for this week. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you found some value in it. We're gonna get back after it. Some of the other guys have shot some pretty nice deer. We're gonna try and catch up with them and see what they've got to say about the rut. We had a warm first half of the rut. I'm usually in a stand from the 5th through about the 12th every day, all day long if I can. This year's been pretty hectic with the real estate business. Had all kinds of transactions going on the past few weeks. We actually had 3 of them closed today, so been pretty fortunate to have enough spare time here and there to be able to get out into the stand and actually fill both my tags. But I know a few other guys on the team are still out. Zach was out this week and shot a really nice buck. Colin shot a really good buck just last night, and then I think Shane Spikesma also shot a big deer just this past week. So that cold front we had coming through here at the beginning of the week really turned it on. I think we're going to be entering a period of lockdown here in the next few days, but I'm pretty confident, you know, if you can get in a good spot, find a bottleneck or a pinch point where bucks are traveling during the day, you'll have success if you can get in the stand and just stick with it. So good luck out there, and hopefully we'll see you guys next week.